What is up, guys? It is July 26th, Monday. My name is Jim Vessel. You'll notice that my lovely co-host, Alex McDougall, is late today, so he shall be joining us shortly. But I thought in the interest of my integrity and making sure that the show actually started on time for once, I would just start the show and kind of get going without him. So without further ado, welcome everyone to the stream. Give me a holla in chat if you guys are here. Movement, how's it going, man? Welcome to the stream. Yeah, he's late. He's got to work, and you know, I don't blame him. Life happens, so this is just a stream, so he'll be here. All right, guys. So just before we get going, just a few announcements, introductions, that kind of stuff. First of all, this show is brought to you by DeploymentZone.tv. It is basically the Netflix of 40K and 40K content, so make sure to check it out. At DeploymentZone.tv, there's lots of different content from like Play on Tabletop, Den of Imagination. There's, I believe, Vanguard Tactics is on there now. Winter's SEO. So there's lots of YouTubers that are contributing. I actually do one episode of Competitive Corner every 4 episodes that are exclusive to that platform. So make sure to check that out at DeploymentZone.tv. And also, we do take live questions on the show. And if you want to know how to get a question in, really easy. You can leave a comment on today's show, and I will ask it next week. You can join the Deployment Zone TV Discord or the Duplicity Paint Discord. The links are both below in the show notes. Or you can wait till the very end of the show when we take our questions and we ask it live, and ask the question live if you're watching the show live. And for those of you that don't know, we stream every Monday on Twitch and YouTube at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. With that said, also just wanted to remind everyone, if you guys are enjoying the content, please make sure to like and subscribe and follow us both on Twitch and on YouTube. It really helps with the channel. I'm just a small-time streamer. Don't really have a lot of followers yet. Twitch is a good platform, and so is YouTube. So whichever you prefer, please give me a follow on those platforms. Really helps out the channel. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can donate to the channel both on Twitch and on YouTube through subscriptions, I believe. So feel free to do that if you guys are enjoying the content. Obviously, I do this all for free and out of the lovingness of my heart. Sorry, I just got a text from Alex saying he's gonna be even later than he said, so I might just bore ahead with the episode without him, and kind of just get to it because he's not going to be here. Ryan, how's it going? Welcome. Fat Dingo, welcome, and Brian, also welcome. I said Ryan and Brian. So all right, let's get into the weekend's events. So this week we had a pretty interesting week. Lone Star Open obviously was the biggest event, 165 players, 6 rounds. And there's a final 8 in a single elimination playoff. So one of the things that was most interesting about this event is that the eventual winner, congratulations to my homie John Lennon, all the way from Brohammer, for taking the event. The eventual winner actually didn't go undefeated. So none of the players actually went undefeated, which is an interesting, I guess, feature of the single elimination playoffs, which is that as long as you make it in the top 8, your basically previous record, your original 6-0 record doesn't really matter anymore. So the goal is really just to get to the top 8, and then it's basically a new tournament. So I'm not sure how much how I feel about that. From my perspective, if you're going to go through the effort of doing, say, a top 8, you should just have everyone play the full 9 games. I don't think, and that way, what that does is it kind of gives you a true winner based on battle points, not based on single elimination, because ultimately, you have 2 players with 8-1 records at the top, and I'm not sure how many battle points Sean had eventually, and we will talk obviously about some of the controversy around that, but for me it feels a little bit off that you do get some winners with 8-1 records that aren't like undefeated, I guess. So I'm not sure how you guys feel about it. Let me know in chat. Big congratulations also to Wyatt Turk, who ran 9th place with Iron Warriors, going 5-1. And obviously, Sean obviously had a pretty good run as well. 3 AdMech in the top 10, which I think is not surprising. They all mostly just lost 1 game, which isn't like a shock. I think AdMech are showing that they're still a very, very strong faction. The fact that 3 of the top 10 are AdMech, I thought was really interesting. 2 Drakari also showing that they're very strong still. And then obviously a 4th place finish by Necron. So congratulations to whoever that Necron player was, which I should probably find out because that would be really nice to know. But I'm lazy and I don't want to find their name. So it was so sad he got dropped out of top 8. I'm not sure what that I don't know what he means. Do you mean Wyatt got dropped out of top 8? Richard? Sorry, yeah, okay. Got it. All right, so now what did I take away from this event? And I think there's a big conversation here which I kind of want to talk about. And that kind of goes to this concept of player place terrain. And so, congrats to John Lennon for winning this event. But from watching his games, what we saw was that he basically, I don't want to say abused, but used is the better word. Abuse kind of sounds as if it's like something illegal or something like shady. And I don't think what he did was shady at all or like underhanded. I just think he took advantage of the tournament format, which is player place terrain, to include the battle sanctum. And he used that quirk of the rules, I guess, this player place terrain rule, to very good effect with combining with the bodyguard rule and a few other things. So I think overall it's not something that I feel is necessarily like, I guess, long-term sustainable, but what it does feel like is slightly exploitative, I guess, in a lot of ways. I don't think that player place terrain is necessarily a great idea. I don't personally like it. I'd much rather have terrain maps from the TOs that would be based on each scenario. So like, say for instance, there's 9 missions in this event. I would like the TOs to make 9 terrain maps with the various terrain pieces. And then based on the scenario, the players would adjust the terrain based on those maps. I think that works a lot better, and it doesn't create any more work for the TOs. They don't have to like rearrange the tables. They just literally have to make 9 terrain maps. Now, obviously, I know there's a lot of controversy over terrain pieces and stuff like that, but ultimately, player place terrain does lead to these kinds of, I guess, exploitative measures, I guess. And, look, just like the Broviathan list, John and the Brohammer team saw like an opening and a opportunity there to take advantage of some rules interactions, especially the fact that the Sanctum is basically an additional like piece of blocking terrain. So I don't necessarily think that this again was anything that like was underhanded, but it just shows how small changes to a tournament format can have a big impact on terrain, on like, I guess, event results, right? Now, so that's the first thing. But honestly, guys, look, John is a world-class player. I don't know if he's number 1 in the ITC at this point based on that win. I haven't checked the actual ITC standings, which I could probably check right now. But, he's number 1 and 2 in the ITC playing that game. So this is not a case of, a slouchy player taking advantage of some like loophole, and then due to that, he won an event that maybe he shouldn't have won. John is, I would say one of the best players in North America. And I always like to say North America, guys. And it's really important to me that we differentiate between North America and Europe, because I think a lot of players, I don't know if it's like a like North American thing where like people just think that because it's North America, we're like the best at everything. It's a kind of like an egotistical thing. But I honestly think there's lots of European players that we don't really see or hear from that are a lot better than a lot of the North American players, including John. I bet you there's lots of players there that are better than him. And the reason we don't hear about them is because they're in Europe and they're not big participants in the ITC. Maybe they're playing a lot more WTC. So I always like to, I guess, carve out that kind of point, which is when we talk about players and strength of players, we really should be talking about, also Australia as well. Exactly. So we really should be talking about players within the context of their regular regions that they play. I think it's unfair. Now, do I think John is one of the better players in the world? Probably, for sure. But people claiming, there's a lot of people that also claim like, oh, John's the best player in the world, right? Or one of the best players in the world. Well, I think there's lots of really good players in Europe and Australia as well that could probably go toe-to-toe. That's not to say he's not one of the best players in North America. He definitely is. And John's a good friend of mine. I talk to him, well, I don't talk to him that much these days, but we've chummed together a lot of times through tournaments. So I feel I know he wouldn't take insult to me saying that, and I think he'd probably see that as well, that there are a lot of good players. Anyways, putting that aside, I think John did there's a reason John is successful, and it's because he's able to, and just like Sean is successful as well, which is they're able to look at a tournament format, look at the meta, and then build lists to take full advantage of the rules in those metas or tournaments. So with that said, I definitely think that John did exactly that. So congratulations to him. Now, obviously, big elephant in the room is the incident with Sean Naden. Now, Sean, obviously, people have asked me, there's actually a question for the chat. There's a question asked in the Discord for later on, which I'm just going to address now because I do think it's a big thing that we need to talk about. And there's actually two questions. I guess the big question is the issue with Sean being over points, or not necessarily. Sorry, he wasn't over points in the list, but he had an incorrect to the last target because he I don't think his list was over points, but what happened was the 3 units that were the highest points were incorrect. He was playing them incorrectly, which through his explanation sounded like didn't make an impact on the game, which I do think is important. So so there's a few things I want to address. First, I think it's important that Sean came out himself and he self-reported. I think that's important, and it shows a lot of class and it shows a lot of character. Anytime you make a mistake and have a rule incorrectly, I do think it's important that you self-report. That's the most important thing, is like don't wait for someone to catch you, or don't try to hide it. So that's really important, and I'm glad Sean did that. Second, on the nature of the mistake and like whether or not he went and he put a fairly long explanation regarding like whether it made a difference or not. I mean, that's always hard to tell, right? Because it's not just a matter of was it look, he's saying that in certain games it wouldn't have mattered if that unit had died. Well, yeah, it does matter. It isn't. I guess my point is, it isn't as simple as saying, well, I'll just give them 5 points for those games, and that will make everything all right. Okay, because in a lot of ways, knowing that unit was a to the last target would change how both players would play the game, and as a result of that change in how they would both play the game, who knows what would have happened? It wouldn't have just simply been that that unit dies, and now they get the 5 points and the game ends up being exactly the same. It doesn't, because if Sean knows that unit can't die, he's going to use it differently in those games. And if the opponent knows that unit is a to the last target, they're going to play differently in those games. So it's not as easy as just saying, okay, well, look at these games, because of that 5 points, it shouldn't have mattered anyways. I think that is I don't think that's important. I think Sean is trying to make it seem like it wouldn't have had as much of an effect. And in some cases, he may be right, but we could never go back now and replay those games. So it's not enough to say, it's not good enough, right? For me to just be like, okay, well, it would have made a difference anyways. Now, on the third point, which is him disqualifying himself from the event, well, I hope this isn't like a case of he's saying he should be disqualified, and the TOs are going to look at it like they did with the last time Sean had an incident like this. Remember at, I believe it was the Alamo GT, maybe, where Sean was points over. And guess what happened? I think it was points over. The TOs looked at it and basically determined that, or maybe a rules playing around. I can't remember what the previous mistake he made, but it was something similar. And the TOs looked at it, and they determined that they weren't going to do anything, right? So in that case, the TOs were left with a decision to make the call. In this case, I think the code of conduct should instantly kick in and automatically disqualify him. I don't think there should be a question of whether or not the TOs can look at his set of evidence, his genuine apology, all these things. Ultimately, those things should not matter, because again, we got to remember, we got to apply the rules. Yeah, sorry, the Razor Wing issue. Yeah, thanks, Richard. So in that case of the Razor Wings, right? Again, it was a case of illegal list, right? So in this case, I firmly believe that the code of conduct and the way that the ITC ruling should work is there should be an automatic kick-in. He should just be disqualified, no questions asked. Because otherwise, what we do is we open ourselves up to this situation now where maybe the TOs at that event, they really believe Sean's heartfelt apology. They really believe that he made the mistake honestly. They look through all his evidence and they're like, well, yeah, according to this, the game results wouldn't change. So as a result of all these different factors, we're going to let it go. I don't think that's correct, right? He made the mistake. He fessed up for it. The event should be removed from his ITC rankings. And on top of that, I believe that there should be some sort of additional penalty, because again, we cannot look at, and this is something I strongly believe, we cannot look at each individual incident individually and then apply punishment and justice on an individual judgment basis, because just because Sean was sincere in his apology and the mistake was sincere, we have to set hard minimum precedent for these kinds of issues. We have to say that if X happens, then Y should be the punishment. There shouldn't be a case of, well, Sean was really authentic, which I believe him. I believe Sean is authentic. I believe it was a very authentic mistake. I don't think he intended to cheat. So anyone saying that he cheated, I think is way overboard with that claim. But regardless, there was a mistake was made. Now, whether it was cheating, I don't believe he cheated, but we'll never really know, will we? We'll never know the truth in Sean's heart. Now, again, I don't believe firmly he cheated, but because we can never know, and we can never actually know at this point what would have happened in those games had the target had the to the last been the correct to the last, right? Maybe Sean wouldn't have taken to the last in those games, knowing that would have been one of his targets. All of a sudden, he takes a different secondary. All of a sudden, he plays his games a lot different. His opponent plays the games different, and he ends up losing a game that he should have won. So we could never know that, which means we have to just apply the law uniformly, as far as I'm concerned, and consistently. And from my perspective, that means disqualifying Sean from the event, removing those points, and that sucks for Sean, but he's had a great season so far. There's going to be lots of events coming up. This is not like the end of the world for him, right? It's not like his whole season's ruined. It's not like he's going to get banned or ITC points removed for the season. It's just one event that he essentially fucked up at, and he's just not going to get points for that. And I think that's fair. I also think there needs to be some sort of future, punishment or consequence, so that he needs some sort of slap on the wrist, because it's not a good look for the competitive scene when one of the top players in the North America, top of the ITC, has two events where he's had list mistakes. Now, regardless of what you want to say about the list mistakes, whether they're yeah, exactly, right? Millipede, I agree. So Millipede saying that if 40K wants to be an esport, that's to enforce the rules like professional sports. In clown mode, I agree. And the reason there needs to be additional punishment from my perspective is because the goal should be, look, this is not a mistake that I've ever made. John Lennon hasn't really made that mistake before. Lots of players have not made this mistake. So what is it about Sean's list writing or way that he approaches lists that caused him to make mistakes? Well, who knows? But there's very easy ways to solve this. Richard is saying we should wait and see what the TO says, but we shouldn't, though. This is my point. We should all know automatically, based on this incident, what the outcome and punishment should be. That is my firm belief, because it's the only way to make it feel fair across all events, across all players, without ever these people are going to claim, look, whatever the TOs decide, they're going to claim favoritism. They're going to claim, oh, the TOs like Sean, or the TOs are taking it easy on him. So that's just my belief. And if I made that mistake, I would take that punishment too. And I'm glad Sean self-reported. I think that says a lot about him. But a lot of people also saying that nothing should happen and that things should move on. I don't agree with that. There needs to be some sort of punishment and kind of repercussions and consequences for his mistakes. There needs to be accountability, and I firmly believe that. So we'll see what the TOs end up doing and the ITC ends up doing, but I think anything less than complete disqualification from the event and also like a removal of the points, and also potentially some sort of future like slap on the wrist so that he doesn't do it again, I think is appropriate. There's been lots of events where people have taken incorrect secondaries or played secondaries wrong or anything like that. Yeah, and maybe lists need to be more thorough, right? Maybe we need to put more points in lists. Like every piece of work here needs to have points. It can't just be the unit, right? Maybe there are other solutions to list mistakes where the list need to be more detailed. But I don't know, with things like Battle Scribe, I know Sean doesn't use Battle Scribe, but with things like Battle Scribe and like even the Warhammer app, we really shouldn't be running into list point mistakes. Now maybe there's army building mistakes, but those apps are fairly legitimate. But then players should also be triple checking them against chapter approved, right? Especially players that are going to be competing at a high level. Sean had gone 2 and 3, 2 and 5 or whatever. I don't think anyone would really care about this, and we would kind of move on from it, but that is what it is. So all right, so second thing I want to talk about, that's kind of my thoughts on Sean. Congratulations to everyone else that did well at the event. I think yeah, there just needs to be more accountability for these kinds of mistakes. All right, so next thing I want to kind of talk about is, I guess, the impact of player place terrain on the meta. That was something that I think people have kind of talked about with the Lone Star Open. I personally am not a fan of it. I mentioned it already, and I did talk about it earlier in the episode, that what I think they should do instead. But I guess my thing is like the impact on the meta. Now, one of my problems with player place terrain is it allows you to build lists where you can guarantee certain types of lists will do better. So for instance, if like Sean did, he's always going to have a line of sight blocking piece of terrain in his deployment zone, in every deployment zone he has, then that automatically means that I'm going to build lists a certain way. And anytime you have that kind of I guess advanced knowledge, it always will affect the lists that people play. And I think we need to really get away from this idea that like players should have advanced knowledge of the terrain. I don't even think they should know the missions, to be honest. I think they shouldn't know which missions they play until day of, personally, because it allows them to, even that allows them to tailor their lists in some way. So when you think about it, in a 9-round event, your first 3 opponents, right, are going to be probably your easiest opponents or easier opponents, right? So if I know that my first 3 games are easier opponents, but say those missions are not as favorable, but then the last terrain missions are, say, on longer deployments or on shorter deployments or whatever deployments there are, I might take additional risks and maybe run a list that has less long range shooting on those first 3 missions, because I know they're longer deployments, but the opponents are easier, versus having those on the last 3 missions are going to be shorter deployments, which means I might skew more into short range shooting. And that again gives me an advantage in kind of the meta. Adaptive subroutines, it's not the matter of you shouldn't have the expectation. So adaptive subroutines is asking you shouldn't have the expectation to line of sight blocking your home zone. It's the problem that you have large pieces and large pieces where you want them. So you really are able to dictate, like, and you can maybe put them right on top of objectives or very close to objectives, where you have a lot of your army behind a piece of line of sight block terrain sitting on an objective or close to an objective. So it's not so much a matter of that expectation. Yeah, you probably should have a piece or two, but it shouldn't be dictated by the player, because they're always going to maximize it and build lists around the fact that, hey, I can have my Night Spinner and 3 shadow, I think it's called Shadow Weavers, behind a piece of terrain right next to an objective that I'll never have to move for the entire game, right? So those are the kinds of things that we need to kind of get around. And obviously, I think you're going to see with all the GW events, right? Because they've released terrain maps. I think players should be able to see example tables. So maybe here's an example table of like the amount and type of terrain. That I think is okay. But the exact placement of terrain for each mission, I think needs to change. I think needs to be different. Because again, yeah, and exactly. And with the Battle Sanctum, and that is further exacerbated by the fact that John took the Battle Sanctum, which gave him an additional line of sight blocking piece of terrain that he's able to have in his deployment zone. So he's able to kind of game that system of player place terrain to additional advantage over other players. Now, many people say, well, other people should have saw that. And yeah, you're right. Other people should have saw a lot of things. But the question is like, do we want people gaming the terrain rules for that kind of advantage? And personally, I don't think so. So that's just my thoughts on it. All right. So next thing I kind of want to talk about is orcs. So we've had some questions around how I think orcs are going to do, and there's actually a question in the like the chat, I guess. Sorry, the Discord. But I guess looking at the orc codex, it's really interesting because I guess when I think about my thoughts on the orc codex, it feels like they've taken away a lot of the old tricks. So obviously they lost things like shoot twice. They lost things like Daka Daka, the old Daka Daka. And I guess for me personally, I actually think orcs got more of a side grade. Now it'll be, it seems like it'll be a fairly balanced book. I think orcs are probably in line with probably where Sisters of Battle are right now, which is kind of like top A tier, not necessarily S tier. I don't think, sorry guys, I had a long weekend and I'm very tired. I don't think necessarily orcs are going to be S tier at this point. Now, there might be some builds out there that are really scary, but overall as a book, it seems like they lost a lot of their most abusive stratagems. I'm really, really happy that all the crazy reroll stuff is gone. I actually played a game against a league game last week where I played my Thousand Suns and Demons soup list against a custom Stompa list. And the custom Stompa with the spell that allows them to reroll hits and Daka Daka is like absolutely ridiculous. With Daka Daka and like the exploding 6s and 5s is absolutely ridiculous. The guy was taking, it took him like 30 minutes, almost like maybe not that far, but it took him about 20 minutes every shooting phase just to resolve his Stompa, his custom Stompa, because it has so many different guns. Each gun has so many shots. Each shot procs on 5s and 6s with full rerolls, and then those procs get full rerolls as well. So each gun was literally taking like 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes to fire all the weapons, roll the dice, pick up the dice, etc. And it was absolutely oppressive too. Like he picked up, I was very lucky. He kind of split fire on Magnus his first turn and didn't manage to kill him, brought him down to 3 wounds. I was rolling very, very hot on my 3+ invulnerables. I ended up killing Magnus turn 2. But by that time, I managed to charge the custom Stompa with Be'lakor and Magnus. And I was kind of, I don't think this is tricky, but it's obvious. But I charged Be'lakor in first because he doesn't allow rerolls. And that meant his rerolls from the spell were not effective, and which meant his like Super Stompa was only able to do like I think 3 or 4 wounds to it from Overwatch. Which put it into combat with Be'lakor. Magnus also went in. Between the two of them, they did, I think, something like 32 wounds to the Stupid Stompa in 1 round, which is pretty fun. And then he ended up killing Magnus next turn, but then Be'lakor finished it off fairly easily with his Super Strike. So that was a fun game. But yeah, custom Stompas are not fun. But anyways, so I think a lot of their, I guess, strength has moved from the rerolls and heavy shooting to kind of more MSU style lists, and I'm excited to see orcs. One of the things I know about orc players is they have a lot of orcs, so yeah, the Super Stomp is pretty nuts, especially with all the rerolls. Like if you don't have the tools to deal with the Stompa, 40 wounds at T8 is a lot to do. So if you don't have the reroll, the damage, the range damage, and maybe you go second, because it's so big, it can usually get around corners to shoot at stuff, and it can take out a lot of your anti-tank very easily. And even if you do say have some anti-tank that can come on, generally it's going to do a lot of damage. It's not going to die in one turn. 40 wounds is a lot of damage to do, so it's pretty funny. But now with all those rules gone, I don't think we're going to ever see the custom Stompa again. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. A lot of talk on orc vehicles, and we'll see how they do. All right. Okay, so I guess the next thing is we'll move on to audience questions. So if you guys have any questions for myself, please ask them in the chat right now, and I will get to them. But first, I'm going to start with the questions from Discord and from the previous show. So, Sean Lemon asks, hey, Sam Lemon, sorry, I said Sean Lemon. Hey, Jim and Alex, what are your thoughts on Sean Lane's LSO to last mistake? What do you think is the appropriate course of action? So I just answered that kind of early in the show. I think there needs to be accountability more accountability for Sean, and I think he needs to maybe figure out a way to write lists that are a little bit better and a little bit more clear, because I think a player of his caliber shouldn't be making those kinds of mistakes. And the follow-up question he asked also is, to become the best competitive 40k player in 40k, do you think it's best to stick with one, a handful, or to two, play any available faction? Well, I think the answer is mixed. So I guess the question is, what do you determine as the best 40k player? So if you determine the best player as the one that wins the most tournaments, if that's how you measure the best competitive player, well, I think in that case, due to the fact that the meta is ever shifting, in order to win the most tournaments, I think you probably do need to play a lot of different factions, because at any one point, a new book could drop and basically have the new flavor of the month hotness. So, like when AdMech dropped, if you had an AdMech army, instantly you're in competition to win an event. When Drakari drops, same thing. Obviously, I'm hoping that like when Thousand Suns drop, same thing happens. So as each 9th edition book has dropped, generally those books have had an advantage for that time, or for the few months time before either they get nerfed or the meta adjusts. So I always think there is an advantage to having the ability to play any available faction. Now, do I think that like it's easy to do that? And like I think the answer is very much no. So I think you'll perform better overall with a single faction. So I think if you're playing a single faction a lot, I think you'll be more consistently perform well. But do I think that you'll be the best 40k player overall? Probably not, because I just think even if like you're playing a faction like Alex McDougall plays Tyranids at a very high level, you can guarantee he's going to go at least like 4-1 or 5-1 at any event. Is he going to have that? Is there enough gas in that faction to win the events? Probably not, but he might actually be a better player than the eventual winner, the guy he loses to. But due to the fact that there's just list strengths and weaknesses in his list, he might never actually win the event. So does that make him a worse player or better player? I mean, it's hard to say, right? But I think that's something to keep in mind. Dan Salmons asks in chat, how salty are you going to be if Thousand Suns are meh? I will be very salty. I think Thousand Suns have generally been meh the entire 8th edition. So if you really think about pure Thousand Suns, they have never really been good. Always the strength of Thousand Suns was in the smite batteries and the casters, or in certain kind of trick lists like Magnus. The faction as a single faction has never been good. Was never really strong in 8th edition. Yes, it's done well in certain metas and certain events. I'm not saying that they've never done well, but I think as a whole, I don't think anyone that plays Thousand Suns would say they were like an A tier faction. They were probably maybe B tier, C plus tier as a whole faction. But I think individually the faction has just not been strong. A lot of that, and here's the thing, a lot of that has to do with the lack of unit options, which has not been addressed with the new codex. We know that. So we know that the codex still has a lot of holes in it, and the lack of new models for this release does not give me hope that all of a sudden the list is going to have the tools it needs. Now, I'm going to reserve judgment until we see things like the stratagems, until we see things like the new spell lores and the casting values and all the rules around psychics. If it does really become a heavy psychic faction, are we going to get an incredible psychic phase to counteract things like lack of anti-vehicle? So we'll see. Tanner Herbert asks, do you think double casting is going to be enough for Thousand Suns? I'm not sure what double casting means. Tanner, do you mean having two lores, two spell lists, or do you mean casting twice per character? Let me know. Yeah, let me know. While you're getting me the answer back on that, I'm gonna answer a new question. Well, I don't even know if they can do that. Like, I don't know where you're getting that. Are you aware that they're able to do that? Oh, it's in the rumor mill. I haven't heard that, so I'm not really sure. The issue of whether they can cast the same spell twice will really depend on what is it that they're casting. Because right now, what we do know, and here's the big FU. What we do know is that Thousand Suns are probably going to get 2 bespoke spell lores. They say expanded, which means we're going to lose Dark Hereticus, which means no more warp time, no more death hex. Now, how no more prescience, right? So how that has an effect on Thousand Suns, we don't know. Are they going to get a natural +1 hit stratagem? Are they going to get other kinds of like spells and stratagems that replace those things? Are they going to get a version of warp time in those new lores? We don't know, right? So how the list plays will heavily depend on those. But I can't imagine Magnus being as good as he is without warp time. He's just not. Part of the reason Magnus is scary is that he can move 32 inches across the board in a single turn fairly reliably, and he can charge basically almost anywhere on the board turn 1. Is he going to lose his 3+ invuln? Is he going to be less survivable? So these are all the things. You know, what are the rules for what is the new replacement for All Is Dust going to be? Are they still going to be immune, getting a +1 save against damage on weapons? Are they going to be something else? Again, we don't know how all these things are going to affect the army. So it's really hard to say until I see what is the bespoke rule. So just like Orcs got the clan cultures and Admech got the operative, like the like various abilities there. What are the bespoke rules for Thousand Suns? So we'll have to see what is the Legion trait, right? Is it still 6 inches to cast? Is it something else? So we'll have to see. All right, from Discord, Chris asks, what are your views on talking about the game if you've only reached the end of the second battle round when time is called in a competitive setting? So this is actually a really interesting question, and I know it came up on stream a few times, it's kind of been talked about. There was a controversy, actually, I believe, a little while ago at the Dallas Open regarding this kinds of issue. I do think it's a problem. I don't know the solution, I guess, because first of all, I don't know what, like, I don't think it's right to force players to play a game. I think that's against, I guess, the overall point of the game, which is to have fun. So if people are not having fun, then forcing them to play the game, I feel is a feel bad, right? So I don't think that is the right answer. Second of all, I also don't think that it is legitimate to play, say, 1 or 2 turns and then say, okay, well, let's just talk it out. Because that also implies that, like, I guess, they can basically just make up what happened. Now, if you think about it, if me and you are playing a game, right? And I say, okay, let's talk it out. And everything that we talk out is like not, it's not like variable. So for instance, if I say talk out and I say, well, I have my 3 to the last targets and they're going to stay there, so I'll get my 15 to the last. And your opponent says, yeah, well, I'm not going to kill your 3 to the last targets. So we agree on that. Well, technically what we could do is I could just say, okay, it's my turn 3. Okay, you go. Okay, it's your turn 3. Okay, you go. Okay, it's my turn 4. Okay, you go. We could do that in 10 seconds and just hand the turns back and forth till the game ends. So there's a way to talk out the game that doesn't require either you or your opponent doing anything. You just basically, okay, go to turn 3. Okay, I'm not going to do anything. Okay, okay, go to turn 4. I'm not going to do anything. So in that case, in that sense, you can essentially just talk out the game and just play the quote unquote play the turns, but just neither you or your opponent do anything. So the turns are over in about 3 seconds and essentially the game ends like that. Essentially, now what that means though is that you should only be able to claim points for things that are like guaranteed, assuming you did nothing. So for instance, getting primary points by standing on objective, maybe like, I don't know, to the last targets, right? Maybe things like getting points for banners that are already raised. But now, let's say you have to go raise a banner, right? You could say, okay, well, it goes to my turn 3. I move over here. I raise the banner. That's the only thing I'm going to do this turn. Goes to your turn 3. He says, okay. Goes to my turn 4. I move over here. I raise another banner. So, like, you could, again, talk out those parts of the game. And assuming your opponent is okay with you literally just saying that you're doing this thing, moving the unit, and then doing it, and then handing back the turn, then there's actually, like, it actually is not materially different than just talking it out. Now, when it comes to things like killing secondaries, and it's like, okay, so if I said, okay, guys, I have to move, let's say you have it to the last target, and I say, well, what I would do is move my unit twice, then charge you, and then they'd all die in one round of combat. That actually isn't necessarily guaranteed, right? Because what if I roll double ones on that charge? What if I whiff on that attack phase? So in that case, where there's a dice rolls involved that are randomized, where we're claiming something random is going to happen based on potential dice rolls, that is a situation where you can't really talk that out because you don't know if that's actually going to happen. And you just saying that it happens is not how the game works, right? Whereas with a to the last target that I choose not to kill, I can hand the turn back and forth, no problem. But with a situation where I have to actually move across the table and kill something and charge something or shoot something, those things you should actually roll out because you can't actually just say that a thing happens in the game if it didn't actually happen. Now the question is like all of that considered, is it worth like having these discussions? I think if you want to talk out the game, I think what should happen is a judge should get involved. So you should call a judge to the table. You should say, hey, judge, we think this game is over. We'd like to talk it out. And this is what we think is going to happen. And then maybe the judge says, okay, I agree with that. I agree with that. But for this thing, you guys need to roll that. And then you guys do the rolls. And maybe the rolls don't succeed. And so that you don't get the points, right? So in that case, again, I think there's a situation where you could do that. What I don't like is when players, like on turn 2, talk out a bunch of like things that could happen but aren't guaranteed to happen as if they did happen. I think that's a little bit shady. But again, right, like, I can choose not to fight back with the unit, I'm pretty sure. So I could just let you kill me. So I think it's a little bit hard to release. But I do think there needs to be more guidelines around it. Like if players want to talk out a event, then they should like have a judge involved. All right, TD, are you thinking of attending the Boys in November? No, I will not. I have decided that outside of Charity Hammer in 2 weeks and the LVO this year, I will not be traveling for any more 40K tournaments. LVO next year because I just don't care. Charity Hammer I'm doing because it's Charity Hammer, and LVO I'm going because it's going to be kind of the first time where I get to see everyone, and it's kind of like an annual event. But at this point, I won't be traveling out of country or province for an event this year. The events that I have currently on my calendar are TACX, which is in BC, and Kipper's Melee, which is in BC. And then that's just 2 events. And then that's probably all the events I'm going to play for the rest of the year because I don't see the point in me investing in traveling for events when there's no point. Like I'm not going to get anywhere in the ITC this year just due to the fact that I haven't had a single event logged. Yeah, Millipede says, what do I think of Dark Eldar? Well, I still think they're one of the best factions in the game. S tier for sure. I think they still have a shot at AdMech. They can beat almost every list, so I think they're really good. Can we talk about the lazy rules writing the orc book? I don't really know what the lazy rules writing is. Oh, the truck boy not getting a truck? Well, I don't know. I'm sure it'll get FAQ'd. Every book seems to have every book seems to have some lazy rules writing. Like look at Sisters, look at some of the ridiculousness that got through Drakari. I don't think necessarily an orc problem. I think it's just a GW lazy rules writing problem. Asante Naden did, I believe, do that. Now I don't know the exact nature of that, but again, if it was a situation where it was like like they're just scoring primaries. I mean, you're allowed to score primaries and any secondaries you'd get when you've clocked out. So if the case is that they talked it out, but they didn't give themselves like points for killing, for instance, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Arthur, you're taking the year off? Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what people want. Like, there's no point in me trying to pay money to travel and compete, because I'm not going to be competitive in the ITC this year, and I'm just out of practice. So I'd much rather spend the year just kind of getting back into 9th edition, playing games locally, and like, just having fun right now. Next year, hopefully. The other thing too is that's one reason is I haven't been able to play, and second, I just don't think the game's in a good state right now. The meta is too in flux. The edition is still too green. The army books that are out seem to be kind of getting worse and worse and worse as far as escalation. So I don't want to invest my time and money in traveling for a game like that. So I will still play locally, and I'll play in local events. And by say local, I mean it's still a 3 or 4 hour travel distance for me because it's in Canada. I'm happy to drive that for an event in the province, but I'm not going to be flying across to America, dealing with all the COVID shit. I got to get, like, even for Charity Hammer, you guys don't understand. I have to pay $125 to get a COVID test the day before I leave to go to the Charity Hammer, and then I have to pay in the States another $125 to get a COVID test before I fly home. So just the COVID test alone is almost $300 for me. Plus I have to like pay like flights because I can't drive into the US right now. So I have to fly into the US, which is about $300. Then I have to get a ride from the airport or from the border back to Vancouver, which is another like $45 to $100, like an Uber or a taxi. So when you add all those things up, it's just not worth it for me to travel right now until restrictions are lifted. Plus there's like the Delta variant. There's all sorts of reasons that I shouldn't really be traveling. So Charity Hammer is my exception, and I'm hoping by LVO next year things are settled down. But I'm not really going to kind of go for it this ITC season. I'm also hoping that by next year the competitive scene is a little bit more sane, and we're not dealing with lists like AdMech, which just absolutely just like table a lot of lists. Dwarnar asks from Discord, how do you think Orcs will match up against the Tourist top 2 factions? Thanks for the content. Can't catch you guys live. I think they'll be okay. Again, I think they have a lot of power with T5 Orcs. I think there's still some power in the list. The problem is a lot of the like their assault got nerfed in a lot of ways. Like the nerf to a lot of their charging ability to charge out of deep strike, with like the rerolls being a lot weaker, not getting the +1 to charge from the culture anymore. I think their vehicles got a lot better, but again, is it going to be enough to get them beating AdMech, which with can they beat a list with 80 or 100 Rangers and Vanguard that are just going to pick up 60 to 70 boys a turn? I mean, that's a good question, but only one unit really gets to jump a turn. And guess what? I'm pretty sure you can. I'm not sure if you can, but I thought maybe you can. They have like an Ospec scan, don't they? I believe. The AdMech. Let me see here. I have the book. Where are you? Somewhere? I don't have it right now, but I'm pretty sure they can do some sort of Ospec scan. So I'm not sure if that's a great thing. Yeah. So Bryce says, what do you think the effects of 2 psycho heavy factions will have on the game as a whole? I'm hoping there's a shift, because what we've seen, mortal wounds have really gone out of vogue, I guess. So one of the cool things about 8th edition was that mortal wound armies was a big thing, and then obviously as smite spam was nerfed with 9th edition from things like Thousand Suns, when we saw that, so that was a big part of it, and then a lot of other mortal wound abilities were nerfed from the psychic phase. Now obviously there are a lot of mortal wound abilities in other ways, but I do think that Thousand Suns, one of the most effective, so here's the thing, one of the most effective ways that I used my Thousand Suns mortal wounds was to snipe characters. So being able to pick up characters, especially key characters out of lists like an AdMech Manipulis or the Engine Seer, any of those characters that really buff up the AdMech is really strong. So if I'm playing against AdMech with my Chaos, I want to bring a Thousand Suns character that can pick up any of those one character per turn per psychic phase. Because if I can run an Exalted Sorcerer up and Armin up and with like Cult of Magic +1 wound, mortal wound, cast 2 psychic powers and basically guarantee a kill, almost guarantee a kill on a character, that's really strong. And those characters don't really have any recourse against that. Their invulns don't help, etc. So I do think that's really strong. So I'm hoping that there is some additional, I guess, fear from a lot of players on some of the psychic stuff. Hill42H asks, if we start to see a lot of Grey Knights and Thousand Suns in tournaments, is it worth dropping your own psychers in order to use the anti-psyker secondary? Probably. I mean, not really. Here's the thing. You can just take Assassinate, because Assassinate is more generic, I guess. I'd much rather take, and if you're gonna be killing characters, I think that's probably a better secondary in general because it's more flexible. Now, obviously, things like Rubric Marines, Scarab Occult Terminators, Purifiers, that kind of stuff, are strong, and so being able to take an anti-psyker secondary against them, like Burn the Witch or whatever. But I don't necessarily know if it's worth, especially if, look, here's the thing: there's very few armies that like really rely on psychic powers. You're talking Eldar, Chaos, I'd say, really relies on psychics. Not Death Guard necessarily; they don't really even need it. But Chaos Space Marines need it. I think Thousand Suns obviously need it. Demons obviously need it. Eldar need it. Let's see, Necron's Town, nope. Orcs probably need it. It's nice to have, but it's not like super necessary. Space Marines is kind of 50-50. Doesn't necessarily need a Librarian. Necrons, Sisters don't have them. Admech don't have them. So there's actually not that many armies that have really strong needed psychic phases. Now, if I'm playing Chaos Space Marines, Demons, or Eldar, or Thousand Suns, there's no way I'm dropping my psychic powers. So really, the question you gotta ask is, if you're playing in these other factions without with like kind of medium, low psychic buffs, you gotta ask, is it worth it? Yeah, that's true, but like, yeah, because Demon Princes are psychers, right? So that's hard to do. So if you take a battalion, obviously you can't use it unless you take and you can't take Typhus either. So Death Guard are probably always going to have at least one psyker, just generally, if they have a battalion. And in the patrol, I mean, you could take a Lord of Violence. Yeah, exactly, Brother Tobias. So generally, Death Guard are not going to have it either. But for the most part, there's actually not that many factions that need their psychers. So it might be worth, if you start seeing Grey Knight Thousand Suns meta, it might be worth it if you're playing one of those non-psyker armies to not include a psyker unless you think it's absolutely necessary. All right, any other questions? Oh, Brother Tobias, that's what did I miss? I don't really know. Didn't miss anything. All right, guys, that's all the questions for today. Sorry, I guess Alex didn't make it in time. He is a slouch, but we will not be back next week. I'm away, traveling. Actually, maybe we will be back next week. I gotta talk to Alex. But I will be away traveling for after this week. We won't be back for streams until August 15th. For the next, August 16th will be the next big stream. We have one stream tomorrow and then on Wednesday, and then we're going to be kind of off for about 2 weeks. So in the meantime, please make sure to have fun, stay safe, and I'll talk to you guys later.